We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
All right. First off, I'll say this. I don't like the double jointed guys, man. They're doing that handcuff thing. So I still have belly chains. I've got belly chains and ankles. I'm like, I'm not bonded anymore, but just in case I got to handcuff somebody.
Hey, that dude I encountered back when I was on a gang unit, he wasn't a gang member, really cool guy. And he said, hey, everybody keeps turning their back to me, talking about the patrol officers coming through the jail, as we're doing paperwork. And I said, I know, isn't that messed up? You never turn your back on anybody. And he said, can I show you something? I said, yeah, go right ahead, man. He does that. And then, if you notice in the video, like he yanks back and everybody always thinks he's popping his shoulders. He's mimicking choking out an officer from behind.
Yeah.
And then when he did it, I was like, oh, hold on, man. So I just said he had on like a little watch cap thing. I say, can I roll that over your eyes, man, and face and record you for training purposes? He's like, yeah, go ahead. Nice guy. He just had like some warrants where he didn't go to court, but he said, man, I could literally choke one of those officers out from behind, put my arms back behind me and say somebody else came in and did it. So, yeah, I know. Yeah, it's a little creepy.
Don't get lax, or don't underestimate, really.
Yeah.
Well, here we are.
Yeah.
I'm Scott Payne, as you can see from the name on the thing there. Did 28 years in law enforcement. I was a real cop first in Greenville, South Carolina, and then I went to the FBI. So I did a lot of stuff. I've been blessed, but I, the book and everything that everybody's talking about is the undercover work and stuff. So we were chatting offline. Yes, codename Pale Horse, and as you can see on that subtitle is how I went undercover to expose America's Nazis. I didn't agree to that. I argued against it because that makes it seem like the whole book is about white supremacy groups. And I'm like, bro, there's like 4 chapters on the Outlaws. There's murder for hires, public corruption cases, all kinds of stuff. But the big wigs at Simon & Schuster who make the big bucks and look at the algorithm said, this is the title. And I'm like, well, it is what it is, I guess. I made a good stand. I gave it a good college try, but so I guess we want to talk about the Outlaws.
Yeah, but hey, real quick before we get into that, you probably already know this, but when I ordered that book, there's like 5 or 6 other people. It probably looks like they cut and pasted and then said like the life of.
Yeah, it's all scams, and it's on Amazon. And I tell people now, so Simon & Schuster hits them daily. But like when I first went on, the first time I saw it, I went on, and you're like codename Pale Horse, and there's my face, and then right under it is Agent Pale Horse workbook, how I did what I did. And you're like, I hit Simon & Schuster. I'm like, did we do a workbook? Because I don't remember doing a workbook. He's like, no, we didn't do a workbook. And they'll take AI and make my face look older, which the one that was on there for a while, I'm like, if that's what I look like when I get older, that's a pretty good look, man. That dude looks pretty that dude looks pretty solid. But yeah, you got to be careful with those. Mine's always, I think right now the hardcover is like $20-something on Amazon. Everything else you should be fine. If you go to a bookstore, Barnes and Noble, Simon & Schuster, you should be fine. But yeah, be aware of that. And we recently encountered one. I found it on YouTube because I was trying to see how many views I had on a certain interview I did, and it was somebody had taken the audio of my book, the whole 7 hours. They had hit it with AI, so it was a female robot voice talking, but it literally read my entire book. And I hit Simon & Schuster real quick with that, and they were all over it. They were like, cease and desist, this scam stuff,
Yeah, and who would have ever thought, when you started your career, probably like me, we were doing handwritten reports. You know what I mean? And then eventually you go into like typing your reports and all this stuff. But who would ever thought you could publish a book and then inside of like a month or less, probably you've already got scammers, putting them out there and people probably buying them, not knowing any better because of the convenience. But
well, I'm like, dude, the audio book isn't but like $18. I mean, what's that? A lunch and a half? I don't know. I mean,
people are sorry, man. There's just sorry people in this world, dude.
No, I'll get it for free. It's terrible, but I'll watch it anyway. Yeah. So you're in and out. You're in an outlaw state. So South Carolina was Hell's Angel state. That's where I grew up. But the biker stuff's fascinating for a lot of people. I am a biker. I mean, you looked at my old narcotics unit that I was in at Greenville County Sheriff's Office, we'd be at spring and fall rallies in Myrtle Beach. And I mean, we looked like everybody else. But that case was a really good case. It's the longest one I ever did deep undercover. I was about 2 years undercover. And the whole gist was the Boston field office in the FBI and your state and locals. It was Massachusetts state troopers, Rocket PD, all these agents that were working up stuff. And they got to the point where they could do a federal investigation. Then they got to the point where they thought maybe an undercover would be great, because a lot of people don't know it, but you can't just really go willy-nilly and do an undercover case because it's a very intrusive technique. It's considered in the FBI, it's considered a sophisticated investigative technique, just like doing a wiretap, because it's so intrusive. So you kind of have to show that you've exhausted all your means on other things, you know. But I went up there, was interviewed for the case, and they picked me. And I mean, the book, I lay out a lot of stuff, go in depth about everything. Because like I said, I think it's like 4 chapters on everything. But in a nutshell, I went in, I started going to clubs that they frequented, bars, and kind of got myself known there. And then I ended up doing what we call a cold bump, just bumping them one night, and they called me over. I'm just being loud and proud and telling jokes, and with this accent in Massachusetts, and I got a crowd around me doing things that I normally do, and they called me over. So let's fast forward, and then I'm invited to an event. Then they're getting to know me. I mean, what's a redneck doing in Massachusetts? Well, I'm a site survey specialist for investors or whatever I was selling. And then as they started exposing, which pretty much immediately they were exposing their criminal activity to me. And then I started exposing that I was somewhat of a criminal. And we started with like insurance fraud. They would report vehicles stolen and then sell them to me at a stolen price. And I was based on the border in Texas, in McAllen, Texas. So they believed I was moving all that stuff to Mexico to sell or trade for whatever, which was a fact. I mean, you could look. There's plenty of law enforcement activity and it was a well-known fact that down on the border, if you had a 4x4 V8 or a Harley Davidson, they got stolen all the time by the cartel and taken into Mexico. So I just played off of that, and I built trust, and then it would become, hey, we just stole this car, take this one. And then it became, Tex, we just carjacked this dude. They didn't call it a carjacking, but they're like, hey, we just jacked this dude. And this truck is hot. It's got a tractor on it. Don't worry about it. I'll get rid of it, kind of thing. And then we keep going. But I remember the president, Joe Dogs of the Taunton chapter, first, when he found out, he goes, where are you from? I said, man, I'm down on the border at McAllen, Texas. He goes, it's like on the border? I said, yeah, it's right on the border. He said, how much can you get a kilo of cocaine for? That was the first question. I was like, well, if you needed predication, I didn't bring it up. I just said I lived on the border. But I built trust with a lot of people, and then some people don't understand. It's like, okay, the Taunton chapter now knows me, they like me. The Brockton chapter now knows me, they like me. But we go to a regional run. You're just getting, the more you're exposed, the more scrutiny you get. I mean, here's a president of another chapter, or the regional president, or the national president. I mean, 5 to 10 foot away from me, pointing and talking loud. Who the F is this guy? And where's he from? And how did you meet him? And at a year and a half, 2 years in, you need to be able to recite that, because it needs to be real. But yeah, we did that. And like I said, they carjacked some people. Then all throughout the case, there's crazy stuff going on. Like a Hells Angels president was murdered riding with the Hells Angels in Bridgeport, Connecticut, because one of the shooting victims didn't die. He was able to say that it was a green pickup truck with Florida plates. We knew that Outlaws from Florida were up with our crew, and then after the shooting, things got really, they're doing a wiretap, they're listening, and they're like, I would call up and we call it dirtying up the wire. I called the wire to talk to the people, and And it would be like, hey, you might want to if you come out here, man, you need to be strapping. I go, well, I don't want to fly with all that shit. If I get there, can you give me a vest and a gun? Yeah, we'll suit you out, kind of thing. And I don't think they ever pinned it on anybody. But if we would have went Rico on the takedown, we probably could have wrapped in a lot of that stuff.
So yeah, I don't want to interrupt, but I like to interrupt. But
I like to be interrupted. So there you
go. So I know a lot of times people are like, just tell those stories, man, and you just get to talking. But so the question a lot of times comes up where people are like, why is it always agents that go undercover with like criminal motorcycle clubs, but yet y'all don't go undercover with like Bloods and Crips? And
we do. No, we do.
The
y'all
FBI
did.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying is like a lot of times if it's I
didn't.
Yeah,
but I mean,
right.
My friends, my peers, and my mentors, and people I've been blessed to mentor, they did. Yeah.
So that's what it's funny because like it seems to be a lot of those investigations get out there and people know about it,
and
then they don't fully understand. Depending on the cities and obviously FBI or ATF, for certain gangs, you got to have certain criteria even to get your foot in the door. You know what I mean?
Just the access. I mean, we can go out here. I mean, as long as you're predicated, which means for the listeners that don't know that, I mean, it means that we have something like either whether it's reporting or something or complaints. Hey, this dude's dealing drugs. You've been caught with dope, whatever. Okay, so now I can maybe talk dope because you're predicated. I probably still wouldn't come out that forthright with it. But it's your access. I mean, and what's going on in your area, like you said, when I was down on the border, was Al Qaeda a huge problem? No. Was corruption, drugs, and human trafficking? Yes. So you kind of work what's there.
Yeah. So, but did you ever throughout your time, and even not even you specifically, but like another team or something, were able to actually flip either an outlaw or a pagan or HA or whatever, an active member into an informant in which they themselves are wired up or fully cooperating while they're still in the club, still in good with the club?
Yes. That's kind of that's one of the things that's the art of what we do. Speaking for myself, all these collateral, like when you hear I was an undercover coordinator, tactical instructor, firearms, SWAT, all this stuff, relief supervisor, those are all volunteer. Those are all collateral duties. The only thing I was required to be was a case agent, and I was a case agent, and I never stopped being a case. Only twice in my career did they label me as, hey, Scott, you're full-time undercover. In other words, I'm mitigated from other casework because, for instance, it's a public corruption case. And if we're getting reports of cops being dirty and I'm in this county that is in my division's area of responsibility, and I'm out there buying dope and stuff from relatives of cops, let's say they get a bank robbery and those detectives show up at our FBI office. If I'm in that FBI office, they're like, you were with my cousin yesterday, so they do that kind of stuff. But I was a case agent first. And that was my thing, developing sources. I was really good at it. I love connecting with people, and that's kind of like, that's me and my style. That's what I did throughout my career. I mean, I'll explain it like I'm training somebody or somebody new or talking to somebody. It's like, look, when I say, can you go out there and develop a source of information, connect with somebody and build a friendship. I'm not talking about undercover. I'm saying getting a source. And when I say that, I'm not saying you go and meet a highfalutin person who's in a Fortune 500 company and y'all meet in a nice coffee shop and you say, hello, I'm Scott with the FBI. And they're like, hey, I'm so-and-so with Fortune 500 company. You know what would be great is if you could give us some information. I'm not talking about that. Yeah. I'm talking about somebody who has hated law enforcement their entire life. And after sitting down with you, they walk away and you hear things like, man, I didn't know there were cops like you. Or for a cop, you're not that bad, and that's that connection. And yes, so to answer to your question is, yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of that. I know not just the FBI, multiple law enforcement agencies. I mean, picture this, you're in a club, you believe in the brotherhood, which most do, whether it's Crips, beat in, bleed out, all that kind of stuff, whatever. That's your family. You're a good earner. This is your family now. If anything ever happens to you, you do a stint for the club. We'll take care of you. Well, then they get popped. They don't roll on anybody. They're in prison doing a stint. no money's put on their books.
Mm-hmm.
Their family's not taken care of. Their wife and kids are starving, and they're sitting there going, "Hey, you rat bastages! You know, I thought we were a brotherhood." Now, some may say, "I'm not going to quit, but when I get out, I'm gonna help. I'm gonna help. I'm gonna get me a little money in my pocket." And even if they don't want to do a recording, I mean, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, "Oh, you're a snitch." Okay, I get it. I've got people I've put in prison who are good friends. We're really good friends now, and they respect me because I was a Fed that infiltrated. Had I been one of them that snitched, they wouldn't have any respect for me at all.
Yeah.
And I get that. I get that code. I get that. But I will tell you, in my 28 years of law enforcement, that is what is said out there in the group, in the street. But when it's just me or my peers, and we're in that one room and they're by themselves, and you're saying, "This is what we got on you. I don't have any reason to BS you. This is a conspiracy, and it doesn't matter if I can show 10 kilos came in and you just bought a gram, but I can show that gram came from those 10 kilos in the federal system. That can be, you can be charged with the 10 kilos. And that's a federal conspiracy. Now, do we do it all the time? No. Do we wrap everybody up? Yeah, to try to get somebody to go to the next level. But I don't know.
That was one that we were able to use the ATF because we had a really motivated ATF agent. I don't know how many we had in our area, but one had relocated to our city. And the day he got there, I was running a big gang intel meeting, just doing a presentation on 8 Trey Crips. Well, he's sitting in there taking notes. So I was like, okay, this dude's plugged in. Afterwards, we talked for a minute. He's like, yeah, I'm linking up with y'all's gang unit. We're going to do some work. By like late that night, they were, one, he's staying late to work, and two, they're already buying a rifle. And so they kind of joined up, he and our gang unit, and worked a lot of really, really good cases. But it was like one of those where even ammunition was being adopted, like violent gang member, and we could articulate like who was caught in a cycle of violence. Like this gang member is this rank in this set, and they're beefing with this set. He gets stopped in a car. He's not, the registered owner. However, we've already talked to the registered owner, and she said he shouldn't even be driving it. Her granddaughter was supposed to have the car. He's the only one in the car, but there's bullets, ammunition in the car.
Yeah.
But he's got that violent history. They would come in and adopt those cases. So it's like one of those things, like you're saying, where like legally you can do it. Sometimes you don't, just because it's a headache and you got other fish to fry. But I always thought, like, if that type of pressure could stay on locally with federal agencies, a lot of those gangs would start to kind of crumble, or at least the beef would, because everybody would get sick of catching freaking gun charges, 7 to 10 years
on a federal level. And you're going to get it, because that's a lot of people may not know it, but I did the same thing with the FBI. I work with ATF a bunch as well. Got some really good friends over there, but I mean, the way you described is kind of the way I am. You call me at 3 a.m, I'll answer the phone. And if I was like, hey, they'll be like, hey, this is how it says he's white supremacy, blah, blah. So ask him this, or biker gang, ask them this, and it might be a point where they go, Scott, I can't, I'm on my way, I'm on my way, and I just text the boss because I know they're not going to get it till about 7 a.m, because they're not going to answer it any daggone way. They wake up and they're like, I didn't know you were out. You still out? I go, yeah, I'm still out.
But that's the thing. That's the thing too that I've learned. Like I always tell people, like, be an asset, not an ass and chair. You know what I mean? Like,
I like it.
Yeah. Like if I call you and I ask you something, or I need your help me, because I'm going to return that favor. And just like you said, it can be 2 or 3 a.m. The phone rings, and it's another jurisdiction, and they're saying, hey, y'all got whatever 5 Deuce Hoover Crips in your city. We just got a car stopped. There's 4 dudes. The car's registered to your city. We want to do some more, but what can we do? Like, give us some hints or help. And hey, give me their names, give me this, give me that. And you start to run it, and you're like, oh, this is all you got to say. Say this. You start to kind of walk them through. And then whatever, they get a gun, they get this and that. And then it's just, returned. I always had that really good rapport with federal agents and local. And that's what I always tried to build, was like, man, like the feds have kind of like in law enforcement, the atomic bomb. Like they can come in
Yeah.
And
A lot of tools.
Yeah. If it's not a RICO or OCDF, even just adopting a simple gun case, once that word gets out within a criminal organization, like the Fed boys just scoop this dude up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or once they do get sentenced at one point, and it changes, whoever's in charge at the very highest, but when the pressure is on, and we had one guy who was a high ranking GKB blood at the time, but that dude got like 27 years in federal
Yeah.
prison.
Yeah.
And
it's
when he
consistent.
did, yes, and when he did, everybody in that set and other sets, because the word had spread, they were like, don't get caught holding any guns. Like the only time you had a gun was when you were actually going to go put in work.
Yeah.
And you know what that did? It just drops the violence, because now you don't have, some characters rolling around with hardware all day.
I took a line from an outlaw. He ended up becoming the national president. We were pretty tight. Matter of fact, had I not physically and mentally crashed, as I discussed thoroughly in the book, the plan was for me to move down to Florida and patch under him, because he was talking around me like he wouldn't talk like that. He was saying things around me he wasn't saying around patch members. But yeah, I agree.
Well, why do you think that? Why do you think that he was sharing that stuff with you?
Because he trusted me.
That's right.
I mean, it's
But
like,
yeah,
a lot of people. So people get upset. There'll be some people that'll hate, and they'll be like, "Hey, you're giving away tradecraft." Let me tell you, man, I was hyper vigilant doing this book. The co-writers, and they're like, "Well, say that. Can't you talk about?" No, I can't talk about that. But then my book, because I'm former FBI and I signed an employee agreement, my book had to go through FBI pre-publication review office. So pre-publication review office. Yeah. PRO. Great unit, completely understaffed, completely underfunded. Took them 8.5 months, and that was with me hounding them every month to get through my book. But in my book, chapter 3 and on is FBI undercovers. So that means from chapter 3 and on, the entire headquarters undercover unit, to include backstopping and safeguard, had to go through all of those chapters and flag anything that they thought was tradecraft or anything. And then it goes from there to the actual units at headquarters. So if it's a biker case, it's going to go to that unit. If it's a domestic terrorism case, it's got to go through DTOS. If it's public corruption, it's got to go through the public corruption. Then it goes out to the field offices. And even where I retired from, they're going through it. And if those case teams aren't there anymore, legal has to go through it. The supervisor of that violation has to go through it. So I'm like, bro, I don't know what to tell you, but to kind of circle back on yours is there's so many things out there. So many books have been written. I mean, look at the biker clubs for 40 years now. They've been infiltrated. They get RICO'd, they learn, and they do. But at the end of the day, do you believe me? And that's, I mean, hey, I need you to shoot this guy. No. Why? Because I'm going to explain why,
So when you're talking about the books, two things. Like, what got me interested in the Army was being a kid and reading books like in the early to mid 80s that were probably written about units in Vietnam. But all that stuff had been classified, or you didn't really hear a whole lot about it. And then when I started reading those books, I was like, man, like this is crazy. It got me interested.
Yeah, same with me.
Whether
it's a movie or a TV show or a book.
Yeah. So now, over the last probably 20 years, if not more, books that have been written about undercover investigations. And so I'm sitting in a gang conference. There's like 400 of us in some, raggedy hotel somewhere. But a guy comes in and starts to present. And if I remember right, this is years ago, but he went under with Outlaws, maybe up in Kentucky somewhere. But either way, he's presenting, but he's talking about it being like going through his probationary time or whatever, and getting busted up and beat up and all this, and what all he's going through. And he's like, and I'm sitting in a bar, and all of a sudden the news comes on, and there's an interview with Billy Queen because his book came out about going under with the Mongols. He's like, and the whole bar just erupts, and everybody's screaming and yelling, and like how they kill a Fed and all this, and he has to play along. And he's like, I made a promise to myself right then, if I survive this, and the next time I see him, I'm gonna punch Billy Queen dead in his neck. Because he's thinking like right then, like of all times, why does this book have to come out now, and why do I have to be on, like dealing with this crap? But I also saw one of his presentations too, so I don't know. At that time, it got everybody pumped up about wanting to go under in a motorcycle club, which was a little frustrating to me because my thing was like, we've got Mongols, Outlaws, HA, Pagans, and then all the support clubs, Wheels of Soul, Outcasts, which aren't support clubs. I mean, other, clubs, but
Yeah.
that whole world has exploded over the last 10 years. But it was all I could do sometimes to get people to understand we've got hundreds and hundreds of Bloods and Crips and Sereno cliques, and they're all shooting each other. And y'all, y'all are looking at, wanting to do these like long-term things, which are cool. But right now, this is what we need to focus on. And then,
So
years later, it was okay. Now we got murders going on. So yeah, someone's got to work Pagans.
and there's so many facets to that because it could be management. It could be management saying we're not putting the resources into this, even though me as an agent is saying, hey, we need to work this. But it also could be headquarters saying we're shifting our priorities. But I can say that the transnational organized crime has always been good. I mean, that's what I worked most of my career. I didn't go to Joint Terrorism Task Force until like the last 6 or so years of my career. And the real reason I did that wasn't because I was tired of working what I was working. It was a management thing. I couldn't get out from under these two supervisors. It was my supervisor and the supervisor above him, and they wouldn't transfer, and they couldn't. The one wouldn't retire, and one couldn't get a job. And after 2 years under him, I'm like, I'm not a quitter, man, but I can't do this for another 2 years. Yeah. So that's why I shifted. But I'm with you on the biker thing, on the book thing. It's funny you mentioned Billy because that's the book the Outlaws told me to read. They're like, have you ever read this book with this ATF undercover agent? They never read the Mongols. I said no, and they said you need to read it. Well, I read it, and I've still got my copy. And when I'm reading, I'm a note. Yeah, I'm like TMI, TMI. I've never met Billy. I hear great things about him. I think we're going to be meeting soon because I'm going to be going to a conference. We've passed each other in the night. Like I'll be coming in to teach and he's leaving or vice versa.
Yeah.
That was a really good case. But in the book, there's a litany. He lays out a litany of things that federal undercovers can't do. And I'm like, go, man, so I tried to stay away from that, no harm, no foul. But
I wonder if at that time, if when he wrote that, if they had the protocol in place to do the book screenings like you were talking about, where
I don't know if ATF does, the FBI does, but the FBI works a bunch of classified stuff, And here's the kicker: they'll go through all that stuff with a fine-tooth comb, doing everything I told you they did. They don't look at accuracy. They're not allowed to judge accuracy. Because there's been some books come out, and I bought them because I thought I was friends with the person. And about chapter 15, I'm like, you lying motherfucker. I'm like, what the? And so I call pre-pub, and I'm like, hey, and all that stuff y'all are doing, do you look at accuracy? And they're like, we're not allowed to. And I go, well, that's pretty evident. I go, because that dude is lying his ass off. I'm like, not only do you lie about me, he lied about Jack Garcia, he lied about whatever, man, so it is what it is. I at the end of the day, for me, I'm an instructor. I'm a teacher. I'm a speaker. I've been doing that for I don't know how many years. And I did it for the Bureau, teaching what's in the book all over the country and sometimes the world. So, if that's not your bag, that's fine. Some people want to sit back and they'll be like, oh, you just like to talk about yourself. Okay. All right. Do you feel better?
This is the thing. Yeah. This is the thing. The way I look at it. You're dead on right. I had a buddy that was to me the best surveillance guy. He would sneak into abandoned houses at like 4 a.m. while we're all like staged back, sneak in. You know how it is. You work like just disgusting, nasty spots, and then drill with a hand drill. It's old, like you move your hand back and forth. So it didn't make any noise, holes into the boards that have, closed off the broken windows and stuff. Of course, 40-ounce bottles full of urine and feces and stuff all over there, used condoms. He'd drill those holes, take a digital camera when they first came out, put it up to the hole. So then the vision is the whole street. So
Oh yeah.
the spot across the street is the one that's wide open. We've had 2 or 3, unsolved homicides out there. He'd get in place. And then, as the sun would start to come up and we would take up our positions, way out on the outer perimeter to do takedowns and stuff, basically quick buy stuff. And he would sit there until, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock when the fish start biting. He had that kind of patience. I didn't. But all those techniques that he had, I'm like, man, why, like I'm into teaching, our officers about gang identification, hand signs, all this stuff. Can you teach them surveillance stuff? And he's like, no, nobody taught me. I'm like, yeah, man.
Oh yeah. I hate
But
that.
I
I
also
hate
got it. I
that.
know, but I got it because his thing was,
I'm not going to give you an award. Why? Nobody ever gave me one. I'm like, well, come on, man. Break the chain. Did you
yeah,
get your ass beat every day when you were growing up? Do you want to do that to your kid? Break the chain.
right.
You know?
Yeah. But his thing was, hey, I don't want them being lazy. Like officers can be lazy. And I told him, I was just like, man, if you could take your brain and download it into theirs, they can move twice as fast because now you've taught them. It's taken you, 2 or 3 years to learn these techniques or less. But then they can move, 10 times faster. I always wanted him to get excited about teaching and to do that. But I will say, like, that guy always would stop what he was doing to help one-on-one,
Yeah.
to teach, to show an officer, if they're doing something unsafe, or, hey, you can do this or that. I think he just didn't want to, like, well, this is what I know. And that, like you said, like, oh, you
Yeah.
just like talking about yourself. And it's like, no, just motivate people,
Well, it goes back to me when I crashed physically and
Mhm.
mentally in 2007, 2008. And that turns out I got PTSD. Who knew? I was
Mhm.
like, I hadn't been in war.
Yeah.
Even with
Yeah.
a minor in psych, I still didn't understand it. I'm like, I hadn't been in war. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But it was Joe Pistone, the
Okay.
Donnie Brasco, and
Yeah.
all these mentors of mine that would call me, and my nickname was Big Country, and they'd be like, "Hey, Country, how you
Mhm.
doing?" And I'd say, "I'm doing okay, boss man." And they'd say, "Hey, take care of yourself, take care of your family, but as soon as you can, put pen to paper about everything you've learned, good and bad, through this entire
Mhm.
process, because
Yeah.
that's how we keep it from happening again. That's how we get great blocks of instruction. That's how we pay it forward." And they were spot
Mhm.
on. And
Yeah.
again, I wasn't just undercover. It's running a firearms training, running SWAT
Mhm.
tryouts, running whatever. And that's just me. And it's not for everybody. So my response, my quick response to what you were saying about your buddy, clearly he wasn't thinking that way. That I was talking about, like the supervisors. It's just
Mhm.
not for some people.
Mhm.
But if he's willing to help, that's great. It reminds me of at my sheriff's office, they had a pistol shoot every year, just a
Mhm.
competition, friendly competition shoot. But it had a trophy and everything. Who got the top gun of the year, kind of thing. And I was a decent shot, but I did not know the 7 fundamentals of firearms, pistol shooting, and all that
Mhm.
stuff. I and I would do okay, but it always came down to 2 sergeants every year, and
Mhm.
and as I got to Quantico, and I'm getting trained on the line by a contracted former British SAS guy. Number one, cool
Mhm.
accent. Number two, cool dude. You know,
Yeah.
what am I going to do?
Mhm.
SAS. What does that mean? you know.
Yeah.
But one day we were going over the 7 fundamentals of firearms, and I am on the front. I'm on the line, and I am getting pissed. And he can see. I might have even been talking out loud. Who knows? I'm that verbal guy.
Mhm.
I might have been going, "Son of a big motherfucker," doing the
Mhm.
Yosemite Sam thing.
Yeah.
But he's like, with this cool British accent, "Mr. Payne, what are you so angry about?" And I said, "These guys knew." Actually, I said, "These MFers knew this." And he's
Mhm.
like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "It's not that I was eavesdropping, but I've heard conversations. I've been in their office. I've seen things. They know these 7 fundamentals, and they haven't spread it because they want to win the damn trophy." And I'm
Ah.
like, man,
Mhm.
it made me so angry. I'm like,
Mhm.
come on, man. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about, if you're in the deadly
Yeah.
force situation, things that can help you get the upper hand. And it's
Mhm.
like, what is wrong with people? So that's where a lot of my pay it forward
Yeah.
stuff kind of comes from.
I had this similar example when I first got on the department. and the firearms instructors were retired cops. So they were basically patrol officers for 30 years and then retired. But they were like, they always called them like the old guard, like, they're like, just listen to them about firearms. Don't ask them how to do police work because they're going to
Exactly.
basically knock
Well, we'd
somebody
ride
over
up
the
on our
head.
horse, right? We'd get on the horse and we'd ride into town.
Yeah. So they
and we
would,
start off whipping and a cracking and a
Dude, you've said 2 movie references that I didn't interrupt you, but I'm keeping track. Johnny Dangerously was that first one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
I'm turning as red as my shirt. That's pretty funny. I can see my face. That's pretty funny. Yeah. The old number was it the old number 9? Old number. We need to go in there with old number whatever.
Yeah, the old.
What is that? Well, that's when we go in there and
riding into town. Thank you.
We can't do police work like that anymore, sir. That's called murder. It's called assault. It's called
Yeah, they were.
There's this whole color of law thing where they got civil rights, and we can't do that. There's this thing called the Constitution. I know it's shocking, but we have rules.
Yeah. So like one of them, I mean, they were just like grumpy dudes, and I also get it because they did like 30 years as patrol officers. So even though in our city you would retire at 100%, which is pretty incredible, but they were retiring at like senior officer pay as opposed to their peers who went through the academy were retiring as like majors, with 100%. So, and they also knew, oh, that major couldn't shoot or would never arrest, or that captain sucked, or they knew all the dirt.
You got to see the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, but the same thing, like when we would go out there, early on in the academy, and we were fortunate that our academy basically would take out the state standards, like for whatever 8 hours of say firearms, and then they would make it like twice that or 3 times. Like we spent like 2 weeks basically at the range, doing everything from the basics to shooting, then shooting on the move, then magazine change stuff that I was glad I got out of the army and had gone to college, did the psych degree thing, and then joined the department. But I stayed quiet. I was like, all right, I ain't saying anything. I'm just going to shoot and do what I need to do. But I would watch the other candidates, and people were nervous. They've never even been around a gun. You got some people that are either from like New York or somewhere, and they're like, I've never seen a gun. Or hell, we have people who had never driven a car. And they're trying to do the pursuit course. Well, they were failing out, because they had never driven a car. But anyway, these firearms guys,
I can definitely see that on some of the driving courses I remember.
Yeah. But like this dude, we had one guy. I mean, he was a great guy, but he grew up in the Bronx, and he's like, nobody I knew had a car. So when he moved, he moved from New York to our state, to our city, to join the department, because you could get hired inside of like 6 months basically and not have to stay on a wait list up there for so long. But anyway, these firearms instructors were doing the same thing. They were like making fun of those who were having trouble shooting. This is early on. Like you haven't even taught them the basics. That dude's never even seen a firearm in real life, and he just shot for the first time on like Monday, and by Wednesday y'all are making fun of him because he's moving the pistol around chasing the sights. Like, calm him down and teach him right. In my head, I'm thinking this. I'm like, all right, well, y'all. And there was one, like the assistant instructors were still active. So like one of the guys, he had just made sergeant, but he had been a detective on the FBI task force. And he was real quiet, but I always liked the way he moved. I'm like, okay, I was pretty good read a character. Like, that dude kind of walks with confidence, but is very kind to everybody, like nice, like, hey, hold your pistol this way. When you draw your mag, do it this way, And I'm watching him watch these two crotchety old guys that we used to say they look like the 2 old men in the Muppets show that were like sitting up in the balcony,
Yeah.
So eventually we do our first round of qualifications as just like a pre-qual or whatever. And people are failing miserably. And this sergeant, he's been watching. He kind of gets pissed, and he tells everybody, like, y'all break for lunch. He's like, you all meet me over here. And then dresses down those firearms instructors and basically tells them, what you're doing is wrong. You're basically going to get them killed, and it's all for your amusement. I mean, it was great how he dressed them down. Then he went over there and spent like the next hour teaching them how to actually stay calm and at least qualify the basics. And it wasn't until later in the academy, probably the end of the academy, that we find out from another instructor that that guy, that sergeant, had been in a deadly encounter in which the detective he was with was shot and killed right in front of him as he was returning fire.
And there's your passion.
And exactly. And that was his thing, was like, this is not about your ego. This is not about, making fun of new applicants and that sort of, it's about how well can we train them so that their first day on the street, they feel comfortable drawing, their weapon and proning somebody out. Because if they're going to work in some districts, that's what's going to happen. So I like that you do teach, and I could kind of pick up on that. Like, I listened to you on Joe Rogan, and I was like, okay, great storyteller, but I'm also like, he sounds like an instructor when you would talk about certain things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, break it down. I'm still an adjunct instructor with Alert. That is the headquarters is out in San Marcos, Texas, with Texas State University. The FBI and Alert married in like 2013 after the Sandy Hook school massacre, because Department of Justice bit off and said somebody needs to be the main active shooter. And not being biased, but the FBI was a no-brainer because we had a tactical instructor, a lead tactical instructor in every division, and you can't just become one. You have to have been SWAT certified. You have to be an active firearms instructor to even put in to be a tactical. So there's building blocks. So we did that. But like even last week, I was out near Memphis, and me and a buddy of mine, me and two other buddies, instructors, put on a train the trainer for the level 1 class on how to respond to active shooter events. And one of the things I said goes right in line with what you were just describing. I said, look, man, anybody can any peckerhead can stand up on a hill and tell you suck. An instructor's supposed to make you better. You may be here and we want you here. Some people may get here real quick, but eventually we want everybody right here. And especially like you said, the ego. There's one of the longtime instructors. He used to be San Antonio PD. He has a thing, and he's a Latino, a Hispanic guy, and he goes, your ego is not your amigo, So that's pretty much like you'll hear that pretty much every Alert class. Some people probably don't even know where it came from, but he's like, your ego is not your amigo. And I'm like,
that's why I always tell people, like, try to stay ego free. And I don't think people fully understand that, because then they go, oh, well, there you are showing your face and talking, and I'm like, no, I'm saying, like, I don't know, I've always liked helping teach people, even going back like to the Army stuff. Like, I enjoyed that aspect. It was only 4 years, but I enjoyed, okay, if I work hard, now I can be a fire team leader or whatever. Now I can start training, new privates on weapons and stuff like that.
As an instructor, though, it's really important that you're passionate about the material you're teaching. You see people go up there and like they grab my block, they don't know it, and they're just like, it's terrible. But if you have passion about it and you believe in it, and you should if you're teaching it, that's how you pay it forward in my book. But I'll give you two song references because you're talking about people. It took me a while. I think it was after the Rolling Stone magazine's article. I mean, I would get so sick in my stomach because I'm trying to make everybody happy, and then one day I just woke up and I said, who knew that Taylor Swift was so prophetic with her words? Haters are going to hate. I'm just going to shake it off. or if we want to do a movie reference again, in the name of Frozen, let it go. Let it go.
I haven't seen that one.
Let it go.
Yeah, when you were talking about teaching, and I do think so, this whole generational thing, there have been people who listen to this podcast who then join police departments.
Yeah.
And they're picking the police departments based on, like, because a lot of times I'll focus on gang stuff just because of my background. That's what interests me. But also any other, basically, organization, criminal organization, enemy organization, whatever. Because I do believe that's what you can have the biggest effect in law enforcement, with at least driving down violence. I mean, I can't necessarily, I don't know anything about DWI. I've never arrested somebody on DWI. I've never written a speeding ticket or anything. Even on patrol, I didn't. That's just not my area. The area was so condensed. That was not the big problem of the day. But when people are listening to a podcast and stuff, and they're wanting to go into law enforcement, they don't want to hear. I'm gonna be honest, like they don't want to hear some loser on the mic with like 8 years on patrol, and then they're bashing police work, and then they're bashing all the supervisors are a bunch of robots, and it's horrible. And so I've had people saying, "Hey, there are a lot of police, quote unquote police podcasts out there, but it's all negative, or they'll pick some incident." And then they critique the hell out of the officer who was doing the best they could under a stressful situation, and then being like, "Oh, well, they should have done it this way and should have done it that way." I get it. That's what we do in the classroom. You know what I mean? Like
that's what the after action's for internally,
exactly.
to learn and not make it happen again.
Yeah.
What did we every SWAT op we did? Hey, what could we have done better on that one? What did we mess up on that one? And if you're being transparent and opening and dropping that ego, then you'll find something,
Yeah. And that's one of those where when you mentioned SWAT, and this is what I want to get into as well, because like one of the guys I worked with, he's a great FBI agent. I didn't fully understand. They did like, I think you call it collateral assignments or whatever, but he would say, "Hey, I'm gonna be out of play for like the next week. We got to go travel and do this or do that." And I think he called them regional teams. I don't know what the terminology was, but
probably.
Yeah, but he was a case agent, but he was also on their SWAT team.
So
how does that work?
That's exactly. So there are, man, I don't even know right now. I'm trying to think. I mean, I retired in June of 2021. I'm trying to think if there's an office that was a full-time SWAT team. Like you see, like through Alert. Like there's so many like Houston PD SWAT. They're full-time SWAT. Dallas PD SWAT. They're full-time SWAT. San Antonio, they're full-time SWAT.
Yeah.
I don't think I mean, unless you're HRT. Now, if you make the HRT team and you're out in Quantico, then you're full-time. But as far as I know, that before I retired, they made it mandatory that SWAT teams train 4 days a month.
Okay.
And they stopped counting call outs, because what used to happen is they would say, "Hey, you're supposed to train this many days a month, but if we had a call out, and let's just say we deployed a ladder and you could check that off in the system and say, well, we done ladder training because we did the call out and all that." They can't do that anymore. So really, unless you're picking up a firearms instructor or a tactical instructor, because you're already on the range anyway, if you're SWAT, you really probably don't have a whole lot of time to do other collateral duties in the bureau. So if you were, what was probably happening is, if you're in North Carolina, Charlotte's headquarters city, you're in middle North Carolina or coast North Carolina, those are satellite offices. We call them resident agencies. So you could have, say, 2 or 3 guys or gals in those RAs that are on the team, but they have to travel once a month to Charlotte to do the training, or wherever that Charlotte team's going to go. And that's kind of the way it works.
So if somebody is interested in joining the FBI, like that's their ultimate goal. And I can't remember, was that your goal, like when you first got into law enforcement, or did you kind of stumble on it?
No, who knows? It all started with Jack Daniels, and then I don't know. I ended up in New York City. I don't know what the hell happened. I tell people, I go, the best undercover I ever did, fooling the FBI that I was an agent for 23 years.
Well, okay, I will say this. I'll say this. I love when I meet somebody and then later figure out, or they tell me, "Oh yeah, I'm whatever, FBI, ATF, or a police officer, or deputy, or whatever," that I can't pick up on it, like that they're not I'm kind of being a jerk, but you know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah. Because sometimes it's hard to drop the cop.
Yeah.
If you're uniform patrol all the time, like you mentioned the surveillance thing earlier, that is man. When I went from uniform patrol to being an investigator, that was a shock. Like, because you're in uniform, man. Now, I wasn't the cop that sat in the cul-de-sac waiting on the call. I was proactive. I'm like, okay, if this is a high traffic and drug area, look, man, there's a 4-way stop sign right there. Let me pull over a few cars that blow that 4-way stop sign, and then maybe we get something. I was proactive, which means you're going to get in car chases and fights and all that stuff. But when I shifted from uniform to investigator, vice narcotics investigator, and that first 10 to 12 hour shift, I was sitting in a car with my basically training officer, and he doesn't talk. bro, I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? You would just go over there and kick in the door. I'll go get the dope. I'm tired of watching,
Yeah.
Just go over there and knock on the door. Listen, I've been sitting over here for 2 days. There's nowhere to use the bathroom. I'm out of food. Can you guys just tell me if you got dope in the house?
Yeah. Yeah. You stop a car and you just walk up and you go, all right, don't reach for it, but go ahead. Where's the weed? And they all look at like the center console and they're like, bro, I don't have any weed. All right, this is what we're going to do. I mean,
Well, you
I'm the
don't
same
mind
way.
if I get the dog over here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
So then this is the interesting thing too. When people are local, and when I say local, I'm just talking about like city, county, and you go from patrol officer to detective. Like some cities are different. Sometimes it's a lateral where you get to do like a year or two or something. So I think like we had suburbs, like smaller departments that their detectives were, the week before they were patrol officers, then they transfer over to detectives. They get to work it for like a 2 year or 18 months, and then they can continue based on their caseload. But then eventually they got to go back to patrol or put in for promotion. So it was like one of those things, like in my city, it was actual promotion to detective. So people could get promoted to detective, stay there for their whole career. But when I got promoted at the time, they were like, I didn't necessarily want to go, but they were like, you need to go to the gang unit. Or I was going from the gang unit. They were like, you need to go to the drug unit. I didn't want to do that. Like I wanted to stay doing some active stuff, gun cases or whatever. Anyway, so I go to a drug unit, like a street level drug unit. But they really, like for us, we didn't go through a drug class or anything. They were just like, hey, Monday morning, report in plain clothes with this team. Yeah. Now we were fortunate on patrol. We had secondary days, so we could actually wear plain clothes, do very quick, like a quick buy or flip a informant and they would do a buy and we'd do a search warrant or something. So I had a little bit of experience, but I had all I ever dealt with was crack and weed. Never done anything with oxys. So we end up like early on, me and a buddy of mine, we've got this source and the guy's like, hey, I can buy some oxy. Like, why do we care? Like the person you're buying from, doesn't seem to have a criminal record. Like we don't really care much. But our sergeant was like, hey, oxy's good stuff because you can get trafficking amounts. So we're like, okay, we didn't fully understand it, right? So we're talking to this guy and he's like, okay, I can order up some oxy. Like, okay. We both look at each other, me and the detective, we're like, I don't know, like we gotta get a trafficking amount. We're thinking like trafficking amount coke, weed, like big weight. So we're like, I don't know. How much can you get? And he's like, I don't know. Like, man, order up like, what do you think? 30? 30, yeah. Let's get 30 oxys. He's like, hold on, you want me to get 30 pills from this dude? And we're like, you said you could get a bunch. Man, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. He's like, okay. So of course we're listening on a phone call. He calls the guy and he's like, yeah, let me get 30. And the guy's like, 30? What you want 30? He's like, yeah. Okay. Give me some time. Maybe tomorrow we can link up. So we're like thinking we're all excited. So we go back and tell the sergeant, like, hey, we ordered up 30. He's like, 30. So of course the price at that time, I can't remember how many thousands of dollars it was or whatever. But what we didn't know was the next day we had inadvertently caused these guys who only had like one or two oxys between them to go and break into a pharmacy.
Oh, whoops.
And steal as much oxy or try to steal as much oxy as they could. So then we're like,
that's not,
wait a minute, we're creating crime by trying to order up. And we don't even know the trafficking. In other words, I wasn't the greatest drug detective.
Well, that's
But
how you learn.
but I enjoyed the cowboyness of it sometimes. So for you did some drug work on the local level, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, on the local level. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had some experience prior to law enforcement with some drug buys, but that was all truthfully told, and it was in my lie detector and everything else. But yeah, I had experience, but I never bought like crack or anything, and that's street level stuff. You go down there and it's like, they go stroll down the corner and hold a 20 out the window, tell them you want a 20. So that was it. I mean, I was scared to death, and that's when I started learning more, because even on the street, I didn't know. I mean, because in my sheriff's office, if you encountered dope, I mean, back then everything was specialized, right? You get there and you go, oh man, it's my PC. I developed a probable cause to stop this car, but I don't know what to do with all this dope. And then you would call, and then an ARC unit would come out and take over. But I started learning a lot more about that. I started learning about how to develop sources, operate sources, make controlled evidence buys with sources. And yeah, that helped me a lot going into the federal level, I think.
Yeah, I think too, how people grow up. And this was one of the things I tried to change, because I had moved up in the ranks, but trying to change, like, for recruiting purposes, telling them, like, tap into people who have lived interesting lives before they apply. There's nothing wrong if someone got in trouble.
You're getting a lot of that now.
Oh, well, yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah. I think, like, I did some stupid stuff. I also hung out with older guys. We used to get in trouble. We would run from the police because someone would yell "run" and you take off running, but I never fought. I never fought any cops. I never straight up disrespected them. But I mean, we got into a lot of fights when we were kids. A lot of fights with rednecks and stuff like that, who were jumping us. But my thing was, when I applied and I had to put on, the application, people in your background, as I started asking questions, because part of the application was, if your certain parts, people in your family were convicted felons and things like that. And so my thing was, it was almost like we went through this period where, and I could see the applicants, because I would go to the academy and teach like one day out of there, whatever, 6 months. And the academy was cool enough to give me 8 hours. They're like, you teach them whatever you think a brand new applicant needs to know about gangs, in our city. Cool. Which, I mean, most departments don't even give you an hour. So
right.
I like that, but it was one of those things where I was seeing at one point where, like, a lot of these applicants, I'd always say, like, hey, who's interested in wanting to work gangs? Who's interested in wanting to work SWAT? Because we had 3 full-time SWAT teams at the time. That was like one of our draws, like, people wanted to come to the city because we had SWAT, full time. And man, for like 2 years, I'd go in there and we'd run 2 or 3 academies a year, and they wouldn't raise their hands. Like, what? Why are y'all wanting to be cops? Until you say something like, you want to be on community squad? Yeah, on community squad. Like, oh shit. Like, you're about to get an eye opener when you get out there on the street. Like, like the fight's going to be on. So we've kind of come out of that, I think, a little bit. But I'm not saying I want to hire career criminals who are going to slide through the door. But I do think I
was going to say, like, the FBI undercover certification school, which a lot of other agencies don't have. They like, my understanding with the DEA friends and stuff that I've had, because when I went through Quantico, DEA was housed with us. That was before they built their facility at Quantico.
Okay.
They get their undercover training at the academy. If you want to do it, you can. If you don't, you don't. We have a certification process. It's a 2-week grueling, no days off certification process with very little sleep. But I was certified in 2002. I started role playing and then eventually began teaching at the UC school from 2003 until the day I retired. I've never known of or never seen 100% graduation. It's
that's good.
It's usually, and it's not hazing. It's usually, I think the average was about 12, like maybe 52%, 12 out of 20, But even the psychological unit, Safeguard, went and started doing studies, because it was like, how can we do all these steps to get them a slot in the school? Because you don't just get a slot in the school. You have to come sit down with somebody like me, an undercover coordinator, who's going to ask you, what do you think undercover is? Tell me about your family life. Tell me about how this is. Can you work late? Do you clock out at 4:30 and that's it? Because that's not undercover, and things like that. But the main common denominator they found with all of the people who failed out or got there the first day and quit was a lack of worldly experience. And I think that ties into what you're saying. Did I commit a bunch of crimes? Absolutely. Was I ever arrested and convicted? No. Whether that's divine intervention or just being lucky. I mean, if
Yeah.
I had a felony, I wouldn't have never been a federal agent. There are some
Mhm.
departments I might have been able to get hired at, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that's kind of a bad foundation,
Yeah. So I
But
think that's one of those things that a lot of people don't. Like, nobody ever talks about that. Like even going back to the Donnie Brasco days, I think that was probably the first movie that kind of put mainstream people like understanding there are agents that go undercover and it's their whole life and what it does to them. Um, but I don't think people fully understand like what you're talking about, where they get screened, and it's not just
yeah,
oh, this guy knows somebody in La Cosa Nostra, or this guy knows somebody in a motorcycle club, so therefore he can go under. It's like, no, it's got to be a little more.
well, you're
A little
getting
more
into
to
you're
that.
getting into the Departed kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
they brought in the U.S. Attorney's Office would have interns, so at some point they would bring them through the FBI. And I was friends with the chief AUSA and stuff. Anyway, he'd say, "Hey, country or Scott, whatever, you might come in here and saying a few things," and I'd go in there and give a 15-minute, 30-minute speech, a little bit about undercover, and they'd always ask for questions. And this one guy said, I mean, bless his heart, he was young, he
Yeah.
didn't know. He's like, "Hey, is anything in the undercover world, like anything you've done, is it similar to the movie Departed?" And I said, "Well, off the top of my head, let me think of a couple of things." At that point in my career, I'd never had a psychologist that was that pretty. I definitely didn't have sex with a psychologist. And if you ate that many lorazepams, you would be in the corner drooling for the next 3 days. I'm like, so just off the top of my
Mhm.
head, those 3 things aren't real, but that's cool.
Yeah, but everything else.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting in the part of how they show two undercovers kind of crossing. If I remember right in the movie, like
Yeah.
one guy was under like Boston PD or whatever, and then the other dude, whatever his
One
name
guy
is.
was an implant. He was raised by the mafia and
Yeah.
became a cop. That would have been
Yeah.
what's his face? Matt
Matt
Damon. It
Damon.
would have been Matt
Yeah.
Damon. Yeah.
And so Leonardo, whatever DiCaprio, is
Yeah.
the undercover. But
Yeah.
then isn't there also a character that was Boston PD that they throw off the roof?
Maybe I got to go back
I
and watch
think
it
so.
now.
Yeah. Mainly the reason I say that is like that idea of like crossing wires when like someone is undercover and now over probably the last 10 to 15 years, most cities and are really good at deconfliction, and there's
Yep.
software and stuff so that you don't like. I mean, I
Still
sent
happens,
them.
man. Blue on blue. I mean, New York City was my first FBI office. That is the largest police department in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we started every day, probably I think every morning at 5:30 in the morning, everything reset for a color of the day.
Okay.
So even if you weren't wearing that color, you could at least scream that color because they were having like Port Authority or somebody's on a subway, blue on blue shootings
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. But just like you're saying, deconfliction like with dope, and that's
Yeah.
only as good as the people who put the information in there. Because there's still
Yeah.
some that play really close to the vest, No, I've been investigating this thing for 3 years. So tell me what you got. Well, we popped a guy 3 years ago and he said he was working for this organization. That's it. That was the end of it. And they said they're
Yeah.
still working it for 3 years. And I go, no, you're not. I go, like, that's a good try. We're going to go ahead and run with this one, or you might work together.
Yeah. We had a guy that eventually became a sergeant of like a proactive team. It's like a district patrol officer team, but he was not a good guy. He was not a team player, we'll say.
Uh-huh.
So one of the drug units, those guys were always like working their sources and stuff, but they would have their notes typed up or written out, and they kept them on their desk. So that way, like a teammate in their office could just check their notes, go, "Oh, okay, hey, I'll do the buy with them, whatever." Well, that guy had been on that unit like whatever 2 or 3 years before, or 2 years before, so it was nothing to see him walking around their office area. This dude would go in and look at their notes. This team sergeant
Oh,
look at their notes and then go and take his officers and go and try to undercut and try to do a buy.
that's a bitch slap at a
So
minimum.
one of the
I'm
really
serious.
good,
I'm serious. That's internal, and I'm not proud
yes,
of it. But that's one of those where you're on the wall and I'm slapping the shit. I mean, that's just wrong.
yes, and so and in the department itself, where I came up like through the ranks, it was always team oriented. My brain didn't even work that way. Like I'll go out there and get my own stuff, or if a buddy says, "Hey, I want to go do whatever, I'm gonna go watch this hotel." Okay, well, I'll do the stop for you, or I'll do whatever. my brain didn't work that way. Unfortunately, most people didn't. But this dude, dirty in that sense, like just a backstabber. But one of the detectives started figuring out, like, hang on a second, how is his team popping our people? So they started creating fake notes and writing them
Nice.
down like that to send him on like a wild goose chase. But stuff like that, like in that drug game where deconfliction keeps units, and I'm saying this for the listeners, like they're like program software. And like you said, it's only as good as what you put in there. And I've done it before. I didn't mean to do it, but inadvertently had an informant buying heroin. And then we end up jumping this dude and he doesn't speak English and he's wearing a gold AK-47 necklace. You know what I mean? We're like, oh, interesting. Anyway, so we search him. There's nothing on there. We can't get the control buy on him because he kept trying to tell her to go to another location. And we're like, you can't. You will not leave that parking lot.
Nope.
So anyway, like within an hour of us cutting that dude loose, our DEA TFOs are calling, going, "Hey, you got to come to the office." So then we go up there, and then they explain, "Hey, this is a big like national operation. They move from state to state. They have dispatchers. They have people that package in balloons. They have people that distribute. Like, you just stepped into that, and you
It
got
happens.
yeah." And that was my thing. Was like, you know, this was thrown at us by somebody approaching her. This had nothing to do with us going out there and trying to step into your realm. And plus, I mean, y'all don't tell us what you're doing, which is smart. Don't,
Yeah.
but
Well, it's
like,
that whole need to know. Do you have
yeah,
a need to know thing? But that
so,
maybe it should have been in deconfliction. That's one of the things. Like you're,
yeah,
but I've also had it on a squad I was on. We go to work with DEA at the time, wherever I was at in the United States, and they said, no, we're not, we're not working that at all. So we build our case, and we hit it, and it's a big seizure, and we do everything, and then DEA's calling, going, this was ours, and we're like, no, we already talked to you about this, and they go, we had it in deconfliction, yeah, at 9 a.m. that morning, we hit it at 6 a.m. So
yeah,
you see that kind of stuff. Or
yeah,
you would see like you would go, what was the number you would cut for like seizures down in Texas, man? You go seize dope. I mean, it's your case, you seize it, and maybe an agent from another thing just showed up and was there, and we're like, yeah, we're good. Oh, you need any help? No. And then they leave, and you go to get was it the FDIN number? That sounds right. Something for the claim of the drug seizure. And they're like, well, that's already been claimed. I'm like, by who? And it was the two guys that just swung by from another agency. They left and claimed it. And I said, absolutely effing not. You put a supplemental on top of that thing if you need to. You need to staple something on top of it. I'm like, they didn't do nothing. I'm like, come
it's
on,
like,
man. There's plenty to go around. Or if we're working it together, you can claim your stats. Don't tell me you can't claim stats. I've had that told me to me. Well, we need to seize the dope. No, you don't. And they're like, well, if we don't seize it, we can't claim a stat. The hell you can't? We're feds. That's what we do all the time. You work with locals, And I said, I'll tell you what we're going to do to make this on that particular instance. I said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. First of all, they were trying to pitch me. It was a group supervisor, and he was doing the thing, and nice guy, but he came in and he was like, and he didn't know how I work. Well, the way I work is I put everything on the table. Here's me. I'll call because these people are doing this. I don't want to share nothing with you. You're another agency. I said, I get it. If I was working for your agency, I wouldn't like me either, because I can work anything. I get it. FBI can do anything. I'm coming into your backyard. But I'll put it out there on the table, and I'll say, this is what I got. And then they'll come to the table, and they'll go, well, this is what we got. And I'll say, look, here's what I got. I got a source. We made 3 phone calls. I got all kinds of reporting. We were getting ready to put a poll cam up, no buys. And they would say, we've got a poll cam up. We've got 3 buys or whatever. And I'll go, okay, I'll tell you what, if you want, I'm just going to take all my reporting. I'm going to send you copies of it to help fatten up your affidavit. That's the way I worked. But this one particular morning, the guy's like, well, I think we got like 4 pounds of crystal meth, maybe like 25, 30 grand, probably like 20 cars and 10 plus rifles or semi-automatic machine guns. And he's like, well, I'll tell you what, he said, let's just meet in the middle. He said, we'll take the dope, the money, and the cars, and you can have the guns. And I started laughing, and I'm like, that's not the middle. I'm like, I said, and besides, you can't charge guns. I know.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have that. You don't have that title authority. But I told him, I said, he goes, well, the guys here are saying, they're saying that we got a lot invested in this. I said, okay. I said, what you got invested is you've been working with this crime task force. I said, let me ask you a question. How many sources do you guys have on the case? Because I already knew the answer. It was 0. I said, you don't have any. I got them all. I said, oh, you know what? Let's even go a little step further. Who's your AUSA? Who's the assistant United States attorney that you got working this case? Cricket.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't have one. I said, so I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to let this crime task force take all this shit. And because you guys can turn it over quicker than the feds anyway. You can flip it. The crime task force can flip it and have that baby on the road probably in 2 weeks, and they can be driving that car if they want to.
Yeah.
And then we just claim a stat. So I love those conversations.
Yeah. I don't understand it. I never did. The whole, I get stats and through law enforcement, especially locally, you get a different chief comes in, and we had a chief come in and he was all about numbers. And it was one of those things where what we saw was actual productivity drop. Officers were not going out there and, doing jump outs or stopping cars or working anything proactive, because there was like these categories, so stupid, these categories of numbers. Like, so if you did a security check in a neighborhood that had, spikes in crime, then you got a certain number for your eval. And all these officers did, a lot of them started working the numbers. And so certain numbers would get more points or value or whatever. And so we're like, nobody's doing like what would be considered suspicious person forms, or field interview contacts. And so what we had done prior to that, chief, was kind of build a culture of, it's 3:00 in the morning, you stop a dude and he's got bolt cutters in his pants and he's got a history of breaking into stuff. If you can charge him and arrest him with something, do it. If you can't, fill out this field interview form that puts him in that location.
Absolutely.
I mean, on homicide,
there's been so many cases solved that way.
Yes, we had solved multiple homicides. Even as a patrol officer, I was identifying people an hour or two before they committed a murder because they were in a part of the city that they were never known to be. They were a gang member, whatever. But then under this chief, because of the number system, people stopped doing it completely. And so as a detective, and I was a aggravated assault detective at the time, and I'm trying to pull up, like, it was cool. We had a program where you pull up a map and you could see who all within a certain time frame had been stopped, documented. You hover over it, it shows their recent arrest photo and all this. I was like, oh, it's great.
Yeah.
And then under that chief is like, like, hold on, you're telling me out of 18 officers working, or whatever district, nobody was stopped during the night.
Right.
There's gang shootings and stuff. But it was the numbers game. And so that generation of officers, that's all they understood, was almost like selfishness, like, hey, I got to get my numbers. I got to get my eval to look good. I'm like,
you can bring in all the extra stuff like Title III wiretaps, undercovers. Those are great techniques. They are great for building cases and getting evidence. But if you don't have just the traditional logical investigation, the traditional law enforcement investigation happening on the bottom end, it's not going to work. You got that's your foundation.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that I like, that when you were telling stories about, and you've gone under with multiple different organizations, and one of the things that you talked about was like meeting up with a team and then actually getting intel from local police or local field agents in that area. Like, okay. And you mentioned like the descriptors of the pickup truck or whatever. It's like, get me intel on all these people, what all you know. And then that's just kind of supplements what you begin to learn as you're bumping people and talking to people.
The more intel, especially from an undercover standpoint, the more intel you have, you're setting yourself up for success, not for failure. And like, say I went to that KKK rally the first time, when I actually got naturalized and I wasn't even sure what the hell was happening. And I figured out, I think I just joined the Klan. That's what happened. I'm like, oh, I'm playing it back. Okay. I was blindfolded. I had to say this. They did this on my knees. Blindfold comes off, sword, hug. Shit. I think I just joined the Klan, I'm not sure if that was the goal for this evening, but we're in. But I've already seen all the pictures and I've looked at them and looked at them, and I suck at names, but I don't forget faces or body molds, how somebody's built. And I mean, so you pull up and I go, okay, that's so-and-so, that's so. I'm not letting them know it, but I'm like, okay, there's one. Okay. And I know some background. Then I can kind of use that to work. And I've shown up on cases where I've driven like 4 or 5 hours, get down there, and they give me their brief, and I'm like, it's pretty thin. I mean, I can go bump this guy if you want, but I got a 50-50 shot. I said, but can I give you some constructive criticism and maybe some pointers? And they're like, yeah. I go, follow this guy, talk to your locals, learn everything you can about this possible target. I mean, what if the dude goes and gets coffee at the same place every morning? That's a great opportunity for me to be getting coffee too, you know?
Yeah.
Just something.
Yeah, I think that, and this is for listeners who are active local law enforcement. Also, like, don't sell yourself short. Don't think about like, well, I just go out here and do patrol, or I just go out here and answer calls, or I go out, do stuff like that in between calls. Focus on stuff. I was just telling the story the other day. I was on patrol and stumbled onto, we basically we would have houses that were, built probably in the 1920s. And then as the families die off and people inherit them and they don't really care, they call them rooming houses, they just rent out the rooms. But it was one that was nothing but sex offenders. Oof. And when I say sex offenders, I don't mean like, a 25-year-old or a 21-year-old dating like a 17-year-old, some weird, like, I'm talking about like two of the guys had kidnapped and raped women, and one was from Massachusetts area, and the other one was from somewhere up in upstate New York. And then there were other guys.
Awful lot of red dots right there in that one house.
Yeah, man, it was one of those things on patrol, like where when I stumbled on it, I'm like, this isn't right. These dudes are always kind of like hovering around the house. They just stood out. One dude had like long hair, and the reason I say long hair is like he's in a neighborhood that's nothing but bloods. You know what I mean? He's like white guy, long hair. Anyway, but
maybe
stuff
you
like
need
that
to let the bloods know, not you, because that'd be wrong because you're in law enforcement. But maybe you need to let somebody let the bloods know that house is full of pedophiles.
Yeah, but so then
pedophiles.
So then I'm just kind of watching it, running tags, and then I'm finding out other registered sex offenders are coming to visit them, and then just forward all that over to Special Victims Unit. Like, hey, I don't know if y'all are aware of this.
And this is the thing when people argue about profiling, I go, I know the word itself is bad, but that is what we do. We're looking. We're playing the old Bill Cosby game. Picture pay. What doesn't belong in this picture?
Yeah.
Look, Bill Cosby reference on this thing. Holy cow. What's happening? Cats and dogs are living together. Yeah.
But yeah, it is true. Those anomalies, and we always taught beat management, and that's what we called it, was our beat. But it was true. It was like that. Like, okay, everybody out here, I know that dude, he sells crack, he's 9 Trey blood, he's G-Shine blood, like, but these dudes I don't know. You know what I mean? And so when they stand out.
I'll say this to those, for your listeners that are first responders, uniform, on the ground, you're the front line. And you know this from going into investigations. When I went to become an investigator, I was that much farther removed from being on the beat. But I would go out, and like the way I would do it is if I got called out and I'm the narc guy, I'm on call, you get some dope, I come out, I don't take your case. That's your case. You developed the PC. Right. I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to help you type this entire warrant out. And I'll even show up to help you if we got to go to trial. I'm doing a supplement, and I'm going to teach you. And what that did is it helped them to get better and learn. And then what would happen is I would come in the next day and slid under the door. I'd open the door, and there'd be like 4 reports. Hey, Scott, pop this dude last night. Pop this guy. Pop this gal. They're in jail. They're willing to talk, that kind of thing. And as the first responder on the front line, you're developing those relationships. Man, when I worked the hood in uniform, I had the black ladies, man, they love me. I had several that, I mean, I remember being in a fight, and it wasn't a deadly force situation, and I wasn't a big pepper spray guy because I know it works great on me, and I've seen it not work on a lot of people. Right. I'd rather get tear gassed 100 times, to be honest. But as I'm fighting, she's coming out yelling with a frying pan, "Leave Officer Payne alone." She's hitting outside, "Hit that dude right there." Oh, pong. And I'm like, we're fighting. But you're developing those, like even and then when as investigators, and now put yourself at a federal level. I'm even farther removed. I'm not even on a beat, so you get those task forces, and it all trickles up. So don't think that you're not doing anything important. Know your area, know your people.
And that's what I love too. When you mentioned that about the grandmothers, is that like they're the eyes and ears in every area. You know what I mean? That's why I always tell patrol officers, like, and they can cuss you. Like, there are grandmothers that would sit on their front porch and cuss us all day long.
Yeah.
But then when we would come through the cut, they give us the thumbs up, and sometimes they'd be like, "Yo, go beat that kid's ass." Right, man, we're not beating anybody tonight. But yeah,
Like
it was,
that was the Fox unit helicopters in on the border. They'd be like blah, 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 start hovering down, and I'm out there in the brush with a team of us, and they go like under the helicopter. We're like, thank you, we're coming.
So,
I love those.
So on the border, were you working that? Like, so you were saying, like, you're actually stopping people out on the border, or what?
Yeah, because it wasn't so much being a border patrol thing, but the majority of the time I was an agent down there, I worked special interest alien smuggling. They couldn't figure out whether they wanted to make it on the national security side violation or a criminal violation. It eventually just stayed criminal violation, but same thing. I mean, it's the same cartel, but instead of moving dope and the dope smuggling organizations paying their quotas, it was human trafficking organizations, and they had to pay their quotas too. So we weren't looking for like Mexicans or what they said, they called them OTMs, other than Mexicans. They were looking for, or we were looking for people coming in illegally into the country from threat countries. So China, a lot of your Middle East stuff, things like that. And it was very rare that I found that you would find a pipeline of nothing but Chinese coming from China all the way to New York City through the Triad or something like that. It was very rare. Everybody just kind of, it was a potluck. Everybody would get to Mexico, however they got there, pay somebody to get across. So you might move 10 loads. You might have sources in an organization, and you might move 10 loads of undocumented aliens across the river, around the checkpoint to Houston and on. I mean, not us. Like, I'm not handling it, but we're following it, right? We got a source in there. And then on that 11th load, you get like 10 Chinese or something like that. But yeah, I was out in the brush. I was with Border Patrol. I worked with Border Patrol daily. I think at one point we had a major case, which just basically, it's a fancy way of saying you get more funding and more assets. And I think on our squad, we had like 10 plus Border Patrol agents assigned at one point. So that was awesome. You just go out riding and go out there and hit the sensors and look for stuff. And I used them with dope too. Same thing. Dope. You see sensors getting activated, and they'd call me, or I had a source, and they'd call me and go, "Hey, they're loading this. It's coming across right now." I'd hit Border Patrol, and they go take a lick.
So I heard it. This was probably like 10 or 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. But that same thing, that idea of coming across the border, other than Mexican. And when I say OTM, people start laughing. I'm going, no, like, that's the category.
Yeah,
because you got America, Mexico.
I'm sure it's not politically correct these days, but I don't know. Honduran, Guatemalan, El Sal, those are OTMs.
Yeah,
they're not like so far away that.
But in one of the and now I can't remember who was telling me about it. It may have been a guest. Either way, but was saying, like, when they would stop clusters of people, that there will be like 4 or 5 guys who are speaking Spanish, and they're kind of giving the agents, they're like, hey, like, these dudes aren't with us. We don't want to be with them. They like popped into the group, X miles back. And then it might be
the debrief. The debriefs usually went like this. They weren't Spanish. They didn't like Mexican food, and they smelt different. that's what I would get. I'd go, okay, well, more nothing,
And then that's what they were saying. It was like, hey, these dudes are like from Syria, Yemen, wherever.
Yeah, we got some from Yemen.
Yeah, well, so okay, so there's a point. There's all this argument and all this stuff about the border. And I always tell people, I didn't work the border, but I've heard enough about it to understand I don't want people coming across the border who.
Here's what I'll tell you. I don't care whether you're left or right. I get on these calls. I'm apolitical in my book for obvious reasons. I'm apolitical on a bunch of shows I'm on, but I just like this. I can give you my experience. One night we got a call, and my buddy, who was Border Patrol, eventually became an FBI agent. He was 1 block behind me. He was my partner. I called him. They had apprehended a load that was. They had interviewed some people, and they knew that it was part of an organization that we were investigating, because we put that on the radar. Hey, if you get a load from Doña Terry's organization or something like that call us.
Mm-hmm.
So we drove out to Hebronville, and in the middle of the night, and it's a hump, but we get out to Hebronville Border Patrol Station, and when we pull in the parking lot, I look at my partner, he looks at me, and I don't know which one said it first, but we're like, we never went through a checkpoint to get here. You always go through a checkpoint to get here. So we walk in and go, hey, what happened to the checkpoint? We're understaffed. It's down. Let me tell you, it's like ants at a picnic. It probably took 30 minutes for everybody on the other side of the river to know there's no Border Patrol checkpoint on this road and everything. So let me tell you, now you picture that, and you picture COVID, you picture other things where they shut. I mean, I'm talking no shifts are working. And then they get to the point that we're like, well, we'll work first and second, no third shift. Bro, I've had sources in them. I've been in those groups. You were sitting in the brush and they're probably watching. And you got the coyote, which is usually the one with the phone back then. He's got the backpack with the phone, and they're watching and they're going, okay, all right, lights are shutting off. Okay, reverse lights are on. All right, backing out. Okay, they're gone. Let's go. We have no idea what's in this country. I mean, we're getting an idea because a lot of them are getting apprehended, but we have no idea what's in this country and the amounts. Because I'm still talking to people down there. That influx, and I'm not saying they're all bad. I'm not making that argument. There's a humanitarian aspect in a crisis, and it's heartbreaking. But just know that those same avenues are being used by people who have nefarious plans and want to do bad things to good people.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up here with, your book covers a lot of cases, but there are cases obviously that you can't talk about. They're still considered classified. That's one of the things that, like, I want listeners to understand that your career spans all these different criminal organization, threat groups, and there's still stuff that you haven't or can't talk about. But some of the stuff in the book, you went under with Outlaws. You went under with, I always say the order, but I'm wrong. It's the base.
The base.
Right. And so for those listening, we're not going to go in depth with all that.
No, you just give a little synopsis on what this new movement is.
Yeah. Because people always want good reads and they want to know that there's legit work still being done out there.
So when you, like you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that, there, or maybe it was offline when me and you were talking, but there's been Aryan Brotherhood, this, that, and the other, skinheads. This is a whole different movement. There are neo-Nazis. So they want Hitler's Germany, but this accelerationist view, the ideology was kind of the order back in the 80s. Picture militia meets doomsday prepper meets white supremacist extremists. And now I'll parlay off of that and tell you, throw in some satanic stuff and some mutilation and all that, because we're going to get there. So the accelerationist view is this. They don't believe that there's a political solution that can save the white race. They believe that society is going to collapse either on its own or from man-made events, and they want to speed it up. They're not the ones that are going to be out on the corner with a picket signs and yelling racial slurs, Charlottesville stuff like that. They're not doing that. They think that makes them a mark, and it does no good. What they're doing is guerrilla warfare type hits, where it's like a poison water system here, power plant taken down here, train derailed, just anything that causes chaos, towns being burnt down. I'll tell you, all this stuff we've seen in the last several years of, and a lot of it's got to do with defund the police. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of the George Floyd, what those cops did. I'm a defensive tactics instructor. I'm like, anyway, that's a whole nother topic. They're looking at towns. If you're an accelerationist and you're sitting here watching towns being burnt down and all this chaos going on, you're loving it. If you are an enemy of the United States, i.e. China, i.e. Russia, and you're watching the chaos in America, you're loving it. So hate begets hate, right? But they want to do that kind of thing. Now you throw in their training. This one group I got into, and we took down, a 19-year-old kid led firearms and tactical training, and it was good. It wasn't the best, but it was good. Like good enough to where I'm thinking, man, if these dudes really want to break bad, they're going to get the drop on a lot of people before, but because their tactics were good. And a lot of them are learning it from games.
Yeah.
They go to the range. They're not military. They've not been formally trained. And then of course YouTube, you can watch all kinds of stuff now. But that's their thing. But then you get into and also like anything. Of course, they hate Jews, and then killing any anti-fascist. It doesn't matter if you're anti-fascist, kill them. That kind of thing. Especially if the Boogaloo, which they referred to as D-Day, once that race war starts, they're like, man, if you're not fascist, that automatically makes you anti-fascist, and the penalty is death. I mean, these kids, well, I say kids, some of them were 20s and 30s, talking about, hey, I may very well have to put a bullet in the back of my father's head. And sometimes they'd cry when they said it, but I'll give him a chance. But if he's not fascist, it's the penalty's death, or my mother, or crazy stuff. And a lot of it's just lost souls, you know, on your extremism. Even if you look at radical jihad, or you look at extreme left and you look at extreme right, they're very, very similar. Everything ends up with your own little state, your ethno state, your caliphate, whatever. You want stuff for free, that kind of thing. Because surely if we make a village full of only white people, that'll solve everything.
Right.
That would be sarcasm.
Yeah.
For the listeners who can't see my face, that is sarcasm. But then you tie in a satanic element. 09A, Order of Nine Angles. And what we started finding, or at least what I found in my research and working it as a case agent and an undercover, developing sources, is that somewhere around like 2020, 2021, it used to be cringe to be an accelerationist. But by that time, if you went on to these dark web apps like Discord, Telegram, Gab, whatever's out there now, Threema, Riot, Wire, 4chan, 8chan, 12chan, any other crazy ones that are out there. They're always creating new ones that are supposedly encrypted, and their home bases overseas, which they believe makes it impossible for feds to get subpoenas out there to them and monitor them. We started finding that like 90% of your white nationalist groups were becoming accelerationist, and that ideology. Then you tie in, if you start looking at most of your accelerationist groups and you scratch at the surface, eventually you're going to find somebody in there with like a connection to an 09A group or something like that. So that whole big roundup, or that whole big thing you just saw, where apparently every FBI field office has an active investigation into 764. 764, I thought it was just human trafficking, but I was putting on training, as I said last week, and I'm talking to a guy that works it, and he starts explaining it, and I go, whoa, that sounds like accelerationism. And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, these are white supremacists? This is extremists doing this? And he goes, yeah. And I said, oh, satanic 09A? And he said, absolutely, because they're big on sexual abuse, rape, pedophilia, and what they're doing. Like these 764, they're going in, much like a cult or a gang in the years past. They'll go in and find somebody who's weak. They're getting tweens, young and teenagers. And mainly the males are doing it, and they're radicalizing them online. They are sextorting them, either by getting a picture of that person doing a sexual act, or even using AI to make it look like they're doing the act, and they start extorting them. They're having view parties, live view parties, where kids are self-mutilating, slicing through their fat, and they call it a bean because when it slices open and you can see through the fat, it looks like a white Navy bean kind of thing. It's some of the most sick, horrific crap, and committing suicide. Like to have a viewing party and it's a lot of, like I said, lost souls. You see some of the ones that I saw, the young ones, the common themes I saw were they were probably bullied, outcast from society, don't fit in socially, doesn't have a partner, and they get on their phone at night and they sit in their bedroom and dive down the rabbit hole of hate. No matter which extremist belief, which side, there are videos and propaganda to help push you towards that far realm, and it's just evil. If you break it down in my world, put it on the table and say, here's what we got, beginning to end. Is this good or is this evil? And pretty much you can, if you look at it that way, in my book, you can usually figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah, I saw some social media post with that. Was it 746? I mixed up numbers.
764.
764. Yeah. And my gut reaction at first was like, I'm hoping this is like hyperbole, people just exaggerating. Because my brain at this point in my life, I don't want to keep thinking about more and more evil things like that in actual networks. Because it was always like the one person you would run across, and you're like, okay, that person's, you know, messed up. Like, in other words, if they disappear, I'm cool with that. But the more, and I never worked special victim stuff, I knew early on I can't control my urge to beat somebody who does stuff like that. So a guy
I'm
was in
with you.
handcuffs and I almost beat him, and I realized I can't, like, I need to stay away from that.
I was that way before I had kids.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. There are certain things in this world, and people used to say it all the time. Like, man, how do you like working gangs, man? You're sitting there like talking to these dudes and all this stuff. And I'm like, these are just normal dudes. Like, most of them are trying to make money. Now, some of them are a little more violent than the other, but for the most part,
a lot of product of your own environment stuff going on there
yeah,
too. You know,
yeah. But man, when I
that's
get
all
into
they knew
like,
growing up, so that's what they're doing now.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we would like, I would always build rapport on dudes and history and all that. And sometimes it will be music. We talk about music or whatever, but like that is to me, that can be, you can actually convince people to leave their own set and you know that. But I'm just saying for
Yeah,
the listeners, like a lot of gang members, as they get to be older, if they're working as an informant or they have enough encounters with law enforcement or a certain detective, that person can start to influence them. Like, hey, basically your organization's using you. Like you said earlier, they sit there and do a couple years in prison. Nobody's put money on their books and stuff. Eventually they kind of start to see the light. Anything to do with harming children, I'm good if they just disappear from life. And
there's a reason that in prison, where it's
mm-hmm,
very animalistic, the rules are very simple. It's the jungle.
mm-hmm,
Even your stone cold murderers and rapists cannot
mm-hmm.
stand a pedophile.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a bad day for a pedophile in prison, usually.
Yeah. Now, in the book, do you talk about some of those investigations? I know there was one, but
I did the murder for hire when because
okay. Yeah.
undercover wise, I
Mm-hmm,
did stuff, but I didn't. I might have been more of running the case,
mm-hmm,
or was going to do one and it didn't come to fruition, or I'm with my trainee. You know, he started working it,
mm-hmm.
and I'm with him like an FTO program. I've got him connected to my hip, and we're going to work this together.
Yeah.
And we're going to figure it out. But I remember one of the ones he got, I think I saw like 3 or 4 images. This is before I even
Mm-hmm.
had kids. I couldn't let, my wife would try to touch me and just not even being super intimate, just come up to me, hey, honey. I'm like, It took me like 2
Yeah.
weeks. I'm like, I got to get that out of my head. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, you know? So yeah, it's a no bueno.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty scary if you go and you work with an innocent images group or
Mm-hmm.
crimes against children group, and you go into that squad and you see how many possible hits, even back in the Napster days, like the peer-to-peer networks,
Mm-hmm.
you would see how, I mean, we could do knock and talks all day, every day. And
Yeah.
it's sickening, but it's right here at your fingertips, you know?
Yes.
And that made it very accessible. And you can be around the world in what, 2 seconds, you know? In the base, we
Mm-hmm.
had members in the base from Australia,
Mm-hmm.
South Africa, Canada, the UK, like Germany. It's all because it's technology right there.
Yeah. And that's the one thing that, like with those types of crimes, the evidence or the ability to store the evidence on them, I'm hoping that makes it a two-way street. They get
Yeah.
access to it, but also you can build a better case or use it and say, hey, there's no denying that this person did this or was involved in this. I remember as a brand new rookie in the academy and a detective who was a minister, he's also a cop, but he was a minister in the church. And I always liked the guy because he's a straight shooter. But his face changed one day when he was teaching a class, and he said he had worked special victims, and he said there was a ring of adults abusing kids,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, this is what they do in our city, because you always think like, oh, that's somewhere else.
Yeah, not here. That can never
Not
happen
here.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. And when he talked about it, even then, I remember thinking, like we talked about the anomaly of like one person doing something like that, but then a ring, meaning these adults somehow, some way have shared information with one another, and now they're operating in concert to abuse children. And that was, 25 years ago or whatever. Now to know that there are organizations that can manipulate kids in their own homes and filming and stuff. I don't know, man. I don't
It's a
want to say
dark,
my personal opinions about it.
it's a
I
dark
know that,
place.
yeah, I know people
I'm
like,
retired,
yeah, people
I'm
disappear
not,
like that.
I'm not bonded anymore. That'll be between me and my maker. It's just like,
Yes. Yeah.
and I will tell you, out of all the ones I've interviewed, if they were honest, they looked you right in the face and they said, look, I'm sick. I'd like to tell you I'm going to change, but if you let me out, I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
goodness gracious, man.
Yeah. Well, now look, switching gears real quickly. So people can order the book, order the
Yes.
real one, don't order the fake.
Yeah.
Do you do like if people want to contact you, especially for like conferences or presentations or that sort of thing, what's the best way they can contact you?
My LinkedIn account or Instagram, and both of them, if you type in Scott Payne, my spelling Payne, Scott Payne Big Country at Scott Payne Big Country, that's me. You'll see my picture, and then you can hit me and request me. I don't answer all of them. I kind of look. I'm like,
Yeah. I got you.
I would love to, but it's just, let's say, operational security wise, and you got to be careful. Next thing you know, you're trying to help somebody and there's somebody at your doorstep, and I'm like, that's not I can steer you, I can direct you to where to go, I can call somebody, but some people, and you get inundated, but the request to speak, that's where I've been getting a lot of them. Or if somebody wants to, you can hit my publicist at Simon and Schuster.
There you go.
David.Brown.
Perfect. All right. Well, good deal, man. I appreciate you jumping on, buddy.
No problem, brother.
We'll talk to you later.
All right, man. Do you need to wait for something to upload?